It was the thirst that woke me up. You know, that kind of deep, 3 a.m. thirst where your tongue feels like a piece of sandpaper and you'd crawl over broken glass for a sip of water. That was it. The clock on the unfamiliar bedside table in this short-term rental glowed 3:14. Next to me, Jonas was dead asleep, his breathing a slow, steady rhythm. The same sound that had been my lullaby for the past 2 years. This place was so quiet it was loud. The kind of oppressive silence you only get in a house that isn't your home, where you don't know which floorboards creak. The wood was cold under my bare feet as I snuck out of the bedroom, trying not to make a sound. I was halfway to the kitchen when I just stopped. Moonlight was pouring through the big living room window, painting everything in that ghostly gray-blue light. And right in the middle of that patch of light, kneeling on the cheap rental rug, was Jonas. My Jonas, my heart did this painful little lurch. He was supposed to be in bed next to me. His back was to me, and he was hunched over something with this intense, unsettling focus. He had his phone out, using the screen's dim glow for light. He was counting money, my money, from my wallet, which was splayed open on the floor next to him. I watched him smooth out a $10 bill, add it to a neat little stack, his lips moving silently with the count. I should have said his name. I should have asked him what the hell he was doing. But I couldn't make my throat work. I was paralyzed in the dark hallway, watching the man I loved rifle through my purse like a common thief. It was weird, my brain screamed, but a smaller, dumber part of me tried to make an excuse. Maybe he's just checking our vacation budget. It was a pathetic, flimsy life raft, and I knew it. Then it got so much worse. When he finished counting, he slid every single bill back into my wallet, clicked it shut, and put it aside. Then he reached into his own duffel bag. He pulled out a small, black plastic square no bigger than a matchbox. He stood up, moved with a terrifying silence to the coat hook by the front door where my jacket was hanging. He took it down, and with a kind of practiced, fluid motion that made my blood run cold, he found the seam in the jacket's inner lining, pulled it open just enough, and slipped the black square inside, deep into the cotton stuffing. He pinched the fabric closed, smoothing it over so you'd never know it had been touched. It was a GPS tracker. It had to be. I didn't breathe. I think my lungs just forgot how. I backed away, one agonizingly slow step at a time, my hand clamped over my mouth. I slid back into our room, got under the covers, and faced the wall, my body rigid. A minute later, the bedroom door creaked open and he slipped back into bed. His breathing immediately returned to that same deep, even rhythm, but it wasn't a lullaby anymore. It was the sound of a stranger, a monster. The next morning, the sun was offensively bright. It streamed into the kitchen, catching the dust motes dancing in the air, making everything look warm and normal. It was a lie, nothing was normal. Jonas was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes, humming a tune from a band we both liked. He turned around when he heard me, and his face broke into that familiar, crinkle-eyed smile that I used to think was the most genuine thing in the world. Now it looked like a mask. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, his voice a warm, buttery sound. "I was just about to bring you breakfast in bed, but your stomach must have been rumbling too loud." He gestured with his spatula to a plate piled high with pancakes, a little ramekin of berries on the side, just how I like it. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the doorframe. The sheer, unadulterated normalcy of it all was more terrifying than anything else. He was acting like the Jonas I knew. The Jonas who remembered how I took my coffee, who drive an hour out of his way to get my favorite kind of ice cream, who held my hand in the movies. The man I was planning a future with, my mind was a screaming battleground. Was it a dream? A nightmare brought on by the unfamiliar bed in the weird, silent house? The thought was so tempting, so beautifully simple. Please let me be crazy, let me have imagined the whole thing. "I'm just going to use the bathroom," I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. I locked the bathroom door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the latch. I leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. First, the wallet. I'd left my purse on the dresser. I opened it, my fingers fumbling. The cash was all there. I'd taken out about $200 for the trip, and it looked like $200. I didn't know the exact amount, not down to the dollar, and a cold dread washed over me. He knew that. He knew I wouldn't notice. Then the jacket. It was hanging on the back of the bedroom door. I walked over to it, my feet feeling like lead. I forced my hand into the inside pocket, my fingers tracing the seams. At first, nothing. Just soft fabric. The relief was so powerful it almost made my knees buckle. It was a dream. Thank God it was a dream. But I kept searching, my desperation making me rougher. And then there, a small, hard lump deep in the padding near the shoulder. My fingers closed around it. It was square, unyielding, and cold. Colder than anything else in the warm, sunlit room. It was real. I stumbled back to the kitchen and sat down at the little wooden table. He placed the plate of pancakes in front of me. They looked perfect. They smelled heavenly. I thought I was going to be sick, so I began trying to make my voice sound casual, light. I was thinking last night about after this trip. You know, we've been talking about moving in together for a while. What if we looked at places in a new city, like a real fresh start for both of us? I watched his face for a flicker, a crack in the facade. Nothing, he just smiled, forked a piece of pancake, and held it out for me. Babe, that sounds amazing. Anywhere you want to go, I'm there. You know that? He then launched into a story about how he'd love to finally meet my extended family, maybe take a trip to see my cousins in the fall. Every word was perfect. Every sentiment was loving and supportive, and every single syllable was a lie. I was sitting across from a complete stranger who had rehearsed my life. As soon as Jonas announced he was running to the local store to grab some wine for dinner, I felt a surge of adrenaline that was part terror, part opportunity. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I was a whirlwind of frantic energy. The silence of the house was no longer just oppressive, it was a ticking clock. My first instinct was primal and modern all at once. I needed to tell someone, but who? I couldn't call my friends or family. If Jonas was tracking me, he was probably monitoring my calls, my texts, everything. The paranoia was a physical thing, a sour taste in my mouth, so I did what any terrified, isolated person in the 21st century does. I turned to the anonymous void of the internet. I grabbed my laptop, created a new, completely anonymous email address, and then a fresh Reddit account with a username so generic it was practically invisible, something like throwaway help 937. I found the R relationship advice subreddit, a place I'd only ever lurked on to read other people's drama. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the clicking sound echoing in the silent house. I couldn't tell the full truth, it was too insane, too specific. So I framed it as a friend story. My friend Anna is on vacation with her boyfriend of 2 years, I typed. She woke up and saw him putting what she thinks is a tracker in her coat. He was also counting her cash. He's acting completely normal today. She's scared and doesn't know what to think. Is she being paranoid? What should she do? Hitting post felt like screaming into a pillow. A small, pathetic release. I didn't have time to wait for replies. I had to know more. His luggage was in the corner of the bedroom. I unzipped his main suitcase first, my hands tearing through his neatly folded clothes. T-shirts, jeans, socks, all normal. It felt like I was violating a sacred trust, but that trust had already been incinerated in the moonlight last night. I checked the pockets of his pants, the compartments of the bag, nothing. Then I saw his wash bag, a worn leather dop kit sitting on the dresser. I dumped its contents onto the bed. Toothbrush, deodorant, razor, shaving cream. All the mundane artifacts of the man I thought I knew. I was about to give up, my panic turning into a frustrated sob when I felt something inside the bag's lining. A slight bulge, my fingers scrabbled at the fabric and found a small zipper almost perfectly concealed in the seam. My heart stopped. Inside the hidden pocket was a phone. Not his sleek modern smartphone that was probably in his pocket right now, but a cheap old-school Nokia, a burner phone. I pressed the power button and the screen flickered to life with that classic pixelated handshake logo. The battery was nearly full. I navigated to the contacts list. There was only one entry, no name, just a single word, handler. My blood went ice cold, handler. It wasn't a name, it was a designation. It was a word from spy movies from a world I had no business being in. I checked the call logs, empty, he'd been careful. But he'd made one mistake, he'd forgotten to delete the sent messages. There was only one, it was sent 3 days ago, the day we arrived here. I clicked on it, my thumb shaking. 5 words that blew my world apart. Asset secured, awaiting instruction. Asset, I read the word over and over again. Asset, that's what I was, not his girlfriend, not his partner. Not Carmen, I was an asset, a thing to be managed, secured, and controlled, and my handler was waiting for his instructions. I was still staring at the Nokia screen, the word asset burned into my retinas when I heard a soft knock at the front door. I nearly jumped out of my skin, shoving the phone back into the DOP kit and zipping it up with frantic, clumsy fingers. I stuffed it back where I found it and tried to compose myself, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Just a moment, I called out, my voice cracking. I opened the door to a woman with a kind, wrinkled face and a cloud of white hair. She was holding a stack of fluffy, clean towels. "Oh, hello, dear," she said with a warm, disarming smile. "I'm Beatrice, the owner. Just thought you two could use some fresh towels. I hope everything is to your liking." It's lovely, thank you," I stammered, taking the towels from her. Her presence was so jarringly normal, so domestic, that it made the burner phone in the next room feel even more sinister. "I'm so glad," she beamed. "Your young man, Jonas, is just the sweetest thing, so thoughtful." I just nodded, wanting her to leave, my mind racing. I needed to be alone. But Beatrice leaned against the doorframe, settling in for a chat. You know, he called me half a dozen times before you even arrived, she continued, her voice filled with conspiratorial glee. He was so particular. Is it quiet, Beatrice? Is it private? Is there a nice view from the living room? On and on. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. What was this? He said he was planning something incredibly special for you, Beatrice said, her eyes twinkling. She lowered her voice as if sharing a huge secret. He told me he's planning on proposing, dear, right here. He said he wanted to give you a surprise you would remember for the rest of your life. The world tilted on its axis, proposing. The word echoed in the sudden silence of my mind. A proposal, a surprise proposal, could it be that simple? The pieces started flying around in my head, desperately trying to rearrange themselves into a new, less terrifying picture. He was counting my money to make sure he had enough for the ring, or for the rest of the trip after buying the ring. The GPS tracker, okay, that was still weird, deeply weird, but maybe he was planning some elaborate scavenger hunt proposal. Something that involved tracking me to a romantic spot. It was a stretch, a massive, ridiculous stretch, but compared to the alternative, that I was an asset for a handler, it was a lifeline. My panic began to recede, replaced by a dizzying, nauseating wave of confusion and self-doubt. Had I just committed the ultimate act of betrayal, tearing through the belongings of a man who was about to ask me to marry him? Had I mistaken the clumsy, secretive actions of a man in love for the sinister plot of a monster? Oh, I said, the word coming out as a small puff of air. Well, I know, Beatrice clapped her hands together softly. He seems like such a wonderful boy, you're a lucky girl. She gave me one last, knowing smile and turned to leave. I closed the door, my back sliding down it until I was sitting on the floor. The towels were still in my lap. I buried my face in them. They smelled of bleach and sunshine and normalcy. I felt like a complete paranoid, hysterical fool. The burner phone, the tracker, it was all just part of some misguided, over-the-top romantic gesture. It had to be. My head was spinning. The relief I felt was so potent it was almost painful, but it was laced with a thick, syrupy shame. I had been a monster. I had violated his privacy, imagined the worst, and worked myself into a state of pure, baseless panic. I was the villain of this story. I crawled back to my laptop, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. I had to update those strangers on the internet, the ones I'd just shared my paranoid fantasy with. I had to correct the record. I pulled up the Reddit thread. It had a few dozen comments already, a mix of alarm and practical advice. Leave now, one said. Call the police, said another. I cringed reading them. Update, I typed, my fingers feeling heavy and stupid. Okay, I think I might have massively overreacted. I just spoke to the owner of the rental and she told me he's planning on proposing. She said he's been planning a huge surprise for me. I feel like an idiot. The money, the tracker, I guess it must be part of some elaborate romantic plan, I don't know. Am I crazy for thinking that? God, I feel so awful for snooping through his things. I posted the update and watched as the tone of the comments began to shift. Many were reassuring. Oh wow, that's so sweet. You're not crazy, his methods are weird, but his heart is in the right place. Congratulations in advance. I let their words wash over me, a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. I was just being silly, everything was fine. I was about to close the laptop to go take a shower and wash away the last few hours of insanity when I refreshed the page one last time. A new comment had appeared and it already had several upvotes. It was from a user named Cynical Centurion. Hold on, the comment began. Everyone is saying congrats, but are we just going to ignore the giant, screaming red flags here? A proposal? Okay, what kind of proposal requires a GPS tracker? Is he planning on asking you to marry him from a drone? And who counts their girlfriend's cash for a proposal? You go to a bank, you get a loan, you don't secretly count her vacation money while she's sleeping. I froze, my hand hovering over the trackpad. The comment continued. But let's forget all that. Let's focus on the two words you mentioned in your original post that you conveniently forgot in your update. Handler and asset. Go on, tell me. What part of a surprise marriage proposal involves a burner phone with a contact named Handler? What part of a loving relationship involves referring to your future fiancé as an asset? Wake up, the landlady isn't your friend, she's part of it. Her job was to feed you this fairy tale so you'd stop asking questions. She's here to make you doubt your own gut, and it's working. It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. The flimsy, desperate narrative I had constructed around Beatrice's words shattered into a million pieces. Of course, it was so obvious. The proposal story wasn't the truth, it was the alibi. It was the contingency plan for if I got suspicious. Beatrice wasn't a kindly, gossipy landlady. She was a player. Her visit wasn't a coincidence, it was a calculated move. She was dispatched to calm the asset down. The shame I'd felt moments before curdled back into pure, chilling fear. They weren't just watching me, they were actively managing me. The friendly old woman, the romantic story, it was all a script, and I had fallen for it completely. The relief I'd felt was the most dangerous thing of all. It was designed to make me lower my guard, to make me compliant, to make me stay put until the handler gave his instructions. The cynical stranger on the internet saw it more clearly than I did. My gut had been right all along. This wasn't about a wedding ring. This was about something else entirely. The sound of Jonas's car crunching on the gravel driveway was the starting pistol for the end of my life as I knew it. I didn't hide, I didn't run. The time for that was over. The fear was still there, a cold, hard stone in my stomach, but it had been sharpened into a kind of brittle resolve. I wasn't just a scared girl anymore. I was an asset who was about to go off script. I sat on the edge of the sofa in the living room, the same spot where the moonlight had illuminated him just last night. It felt like a lifetime ago. I placed the cheap Nokia phone on the center of the wooden coffee table. It sat there looking small and insignificant, but it felt like a bomb. The front door opened and he walked in, a grocery bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. He was smiling. "I got that Cabernet you love," he started to say, and then he saw my face. His smile faltered, then his eyes dropped to the coffee table. He saw the phone. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The warm, loving mask of Jonas didn't just slip. It evaporated, the light in his eyes went out. His shoulders, which were always so relaxed and open, seemed to harden. The man standing in the doorway was a complete stranger. His face was a blank, professional calm that was more frightening than any expression of anger could ever be. He slowly placed the bag and the wine on the floor, his movements deliberate, economical. He knew the game was up. "Carmen," he said, and his voice was different. The warmth was gone. It was flat, toneless. "Who is handler?" I asked. My own voice was surprisingly steady. He didn't answer, he just looked at me, his eyes assessing, calculating. He wasn't looking at his girlfriend anymore. He was looking at a problem that needed to be solved. "Who is handler?" I repeated, pushing the words out. "And what kind of instructions are you waiting for? Instructions on what to do with your asset." He flinched at the word, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch in his jaw. That's how I knew I had him. He let out a long, slow breath, a sound of profound weariness. He walked over and sank into the armchair opposite me, running a hand over his face. He looked exhausted. "My name isn't Jonas," he said quietly. The confession, when it came, wasn't a torrent. It was a slow, painful leak of facts, each one another nail in the coffin of our life together. His name was Daniel. He worked for a corporate risk management firm, a polite term, he explained, for a company that specializes in finding people who don't want to be found and recovering things they don't want to give back. And the person they were looking for was my father. I hadn't seen my dad in over 5 years. He was a businessman, always involved in complex, high-stakes deals I never understood. One day, he just vanished. He sent me a single, cryptic email saying he was in trouble and that it was safer for me if he disappeared. He'd send money to my account sporadically, but that was it. No calls, no letters. Apparently, one of his last deals had gone spectacularly wrong. He'd cost some very powerful, very unforgiving people a fortune. Those people had hired Daniel's firm. For a year, they'd tried to find him and failed. So they moved to Plan B, they moved to me. Daniel's entire job for the last 2 years was to become my life. He was fed my profile, my likes, my dislikes, my favorite movies, my political leanings. He was meticulously crafted to be my perfect man. The first meeting in that coffee shop wasn't a coincidence. It was an ambush. Our entire relationship, every laugh, every trip, every whispered "I love you" was a long con operation. This vacation was the final phase. The goal was to isolate me from my routine, my friends, and then, through some manufactured crisis or immense pressure, force me to contact the one person I would turn to in a real emergency. My father, the GPS was to track me if I bolted. The cash counting was to understand my immediate resources. Was any of it real? I whispered, the question tearing at my throat. Any of it. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something beyond the professional calm. I saw a crack in the facade. It looked like regret. "The job was to make you love me," he said, his voice hoarse. "The complication was that I fell in love with you too." The words should have meant something, but they were just salt in a wound so deep I couldn't even feel the bottom. There was no shouting match, no plates were thrown. The climax of my life's greatest betrayal wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, suffocating implosion. The truth just hung in the air between us, thick and toxic, poisoning everything. I looked at him, at Daniel. I saw the man who had held me when I had the flu, who had patiently taught me how to change a tire, who had whispered that he loved me in the dark. And I saw the man who had reported my emotional state to a handler and labeled me an asset. The two images wouldn't merge. They just flickered back and forth, making me feel dizzy and sick. He loved me, that's what he said, but his love came with a GPS tracker. His love came with a burner phone. His love was a cage, meticulously built and beautifully decorated, and I had willingly walked into it. The cost of his love was my life. I stood up. My body felt strangely light, hollowed out. "I'm leaving," I said. It wasn't a question or a threat, it was a statement of fact. He just nodded slowly, his eyes full of a misery that I couldn't bring myself to care about. He didn't try to stop me. Maybe that was his final, twisted act of love. Or maybe his instructions didn't cover this specific scenario. I walked into the bedroom and pulled my suitcase from the closet. I packed my things with a numb, robotic efficiency. I didn't look at him, I couldn't. I grabbed my purse. I took my jacket from the hook by the door, the one with the tracker still buried in its lining. I left it on the floor. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I got in my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just drove. Hours later, I found myself in a cheap, anonymous motel room a few hundred miles away. The sheets were scratchy and smelled of stale smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, my laptop open in front of me. I logged back into Reddit one last time. "Final update," I typed. "It's over, it wasn't a proposal, none of it was real. Thank you for helping me see the truth. I'm safe for now, but I don't know where to go from here." I closed the laptop. The room was dark except for the blinking red light of the smoke detector on the ceiling. I was free, but my past, my love, my trust, it was all gone, a casualty of a war I never even knew I was fighting. And as I stared out the window at the unfamiliar darkness, I realized I wasn't just running from him. I was running from a ghost, my father, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone.